In this section, we will be looking at classroom strategies that address challenging behaviors. Challenging behaviors is cited as the #1 barrier to implementing the curriculum. I often hear teachers say that they can't get to the curriculum until the behaviors are more under control. The irony is that engaging and challenging curriculum is one of the most effective strategies for addressing challenging behaviors. For sure, there are children at Tier 3 who need more intensive, targeted intervention and support. And the strategies in this section, while certainly helpful for them, will primarily address Tier 1, whole class, and Tier 2, small group interventions. First, let's define challenging behaviors. What do you see them do? What do you think they think, feel, and understand? Action is easier to describe because it's literally right in your face. But thoughts and emotions are more complex and mysterious, and yet we ascribe these just as easily. He's being willful, defiant, etc. But that suggests a lot more control that children have. An important frame to develop is that children do not act out of a sense of defiance or willfulness or malice, but out of a lack of skill, whether it's emotional or cognitive. The roots of challenging behavior are many and varied for each child. The factor of "then I went to school" is related to culturally responsive teaching, which will be addressed in another section of this module. Cultural differences can be obvious, such as language, traditions, religion, etc. But there are more nuanced differences, such as group versus individual affinity. In school, we expect children to raise their hand to speak, but for many cultures, people talking all at once is not just perfectly acceptable, it's the preferred mode of communication. Or the way that adults and children are expected to relate to each other. Oftentimes, we expect children to make eye contact when speaking, but for many children, this is uncomfortable and is a sign of disrespect. You will have noticed that in focus, we emphasize go questions, open-ended questions. We know that these develop critical thinking, but for children who are not accustomed to being asked the questions in this way, we may get frustrated when they don't respond the way we expect. This doesn't mean we stop asking questions just because they're not used to it. It does mean that we understand that this, like many learning habits, take time and effort to develop. It is helpful to think about classroom strategies as assembling a fully stocked toolbox. Not every tool or approach will work for every child. So the more tools we have, the more possibilities we have to work with. And we want to think about matching the best tool for the situation at hand, rather than a one-size-fits-all approach. Many helpful tools and strategies can be found in the Setup for Success manual that you got at the spring conference, and is also available on our website. The blueprint in our toolbox is a systems mindset. Systems take time and patience to develop, as well as regular maintenance to operate smoothly. This is the blueprint in action. First, anticipate challenges. Know what will trigger behaviors and plan ahead. For example, if the activity is to build a neighborhood in the block area, but you've noticed a child becoming too overwhelmed by others in his personal space, you might want to mark out on the floor with tape or a piece of cloth where the child should build. Investigate behavior with genuine curiosity. Approach conflicts or situations with questions like, what's happening here? What's going on? This will be experienced by the child as empathy rather than an uh-oh, I'm in trouble, which often escalates situations. Finally, participate with neutral questions such as, what do you need? How can I help you get what you want? This approach feels to the child like you're being an ally rather than, again, them being in trouble. Systems of rewards and consequences may address challenging behavior in the short term, but often do not produce long-term change because it's merely a manipulation of behavior rather than a teaching of skill. One of the most powerful tools in our toolbox is teacher talk, how we communicate. Interestingly, communication is experienced as 7% words, 38% tone, and 55% body language. For example, you may be asking the neutral question, what's happening here? But if your arms are crossed and your body is tense, that negates any neutrality or any possibility of ally building with the child. It may seem like challenging behavior comes out of nowhere, when in reality, there are distinctive states for each behavior. And the more we are aware of what each state looks like, the more we are able to respond appropriately and de-escalate situations. In the anxious state, a child may be obvious and say things like, I miss my mommy, or I'm really sad. Or it might be subtle, like fidgeting or even giggling. Appropriate responses include door openers. I'm sad. Do you want to sit with me for a while? Validating or rephrasing what a child says. If they say, no one wants to play with me, I hate everybody, you might say, you feel left out and that doesn't feel good. Or responding to the need and not to the action. If a child says, this is stupid, I hate everything, your response might be, do you need help? If we don't respond to that child in the anxious state, they may quickly move on to the agitated. Here, strong emotions confuse their thinking and their actions. Control is a big issue. A child in this state is looking for a challenge, not a choice. Anger is often a secondary emotion to frustration, disappointment, pain, or fear. Therefore, our response needs to be very measured, staying in the moment, avoiding why questions, and limiting our verbal interactions. In the aggressive state, children are completely overwhelmed, emotionally and physically. Their body is flooded with cortisol, a panic chemical, and that's what causes them to lash out, run away, or hide. Our response to this state has to be as controlled as they are out of control. Limit eye contact and words. Use and instead of but. Describe what's happening in front of you. You're so upset, you're crying so hard. Or assuming what's called the L stance. And it sends a message of safety and neutrality and the confident bearing of a person in charge. Look for vulnerabilities and calming down cues, such as controlled breathing, relaxing of their shoulders, dropping of their chin. When you see these signals, come in with a response that is similar to the agitated stage. Sage, I know that this is hard for you, but we're going to get through it. While it is often our goal to avert or de-escalate a crisis situation, it's also important to pay attention to the issues in this final state. Recognize the toll a challenging situation takes on you and the child, and that you're both vulnerable and still emotional right afterwards. But commit to reestablishing the relationship between you and the child to the group. Earlier in this section, we talked about systems of rewards and consequences. Now let's watch a video of Alfie Kohn, who has done extensive research on the role of engagement, motivation, and discipline in classrooms.